And in this episode, you get an award, and you get an award, and
Right.
you get an award. Welcome to Disparate Worlds, where an irresistible force meets an immovable object. I'm Mox, and this is Sechari, and we are comparing and contrasting the worlds of Pantheon, Rise of the Fallen, and Ashes of Creation.
Yes, we are. Hello to you, friends. It's been a minute, Mr. Mox, since we last actually did a good old fight on our channel.
I think we kind of
episode.
skipped the holiday season, so here we are kicking off 2023, and in this episode, you get an award, and you get an award, and
Right.
you get an award.
Everybody seems to be getting participation trophies. If you're in the
That's
game,
right.
you're getting something, right? Is that how it goes? So
I think it is, or either for good or for bad. That's the way it is.
yes.
Oh my gosh, there's my cat.
Yeah, goodness.
Attacking
me. Cat gets an award, right? Cat showed up,
There
gets
you
an
go.
award. Yeah. So that is what we are going to be discussing tonight, friends. It is early into 2023, and all of the MMO sites have done their it's 2022 end of year awards, right? So they all do their
Right.
awards. We thought we would take a gander at what those were, see if Ashes of Creation or Pantheon Rise of the Fallen show up in any of them. And they did in one or two, which is actually pretty cool. And then
Right.
I'd like to air some beefs about it. I think
You and your dried meat.
right, yeah, it's just biltong in South Africa is what we call it. It's kind of like jerky. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll discuss it. Some kind of issues I have. The more I think about it, but there's some stuff I don't like about the approach, and so I figured, hey, let's sucker Mox into making an episode about it and see what everybody has to say. So we would love to hear what you have to say about all of this too. Hit us up in the comments. We would love to hear it. While you're at it, like and subscribe, right? As always, for sure.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mox. It seems to me that the best way to kick this discussion off is probably to do a slight synopsis of everything that is out there. That's a big word that just means let's look at everything all at once. Can we do that?
I didn't know that.
I don't know. You never know who knows it or not, and you know me, right? I tend to be I think of myself more highly than I ought, probably.
Of a wordsmith, somewhat of a wordsmith.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so maybe we should have a best wordsmith category in here, right? There's categories for everything else. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
There are extensive links in the description for this episode to all of what we are referring here, right? Every MMORPG site did their list.
Right.
So you go look at it, have fun, have a blast. We'll give those links to you, and you can go do that.
Right. So obviously, that this being our our games are MMO games. Like,
yes.
So we're both Ashes and Pantheon are MMO games. We're kind of focusing on the sites that are covering those. It's supposed to be their thing. Like MMORPG.com, MMO.com,
right.
Massively Multiplayer. Like all these sites are supposed to be MMO sites, but what is an MMO? Like what qualifies as an MMO? Like is it supposed to be significant players in an online world playing together? Like that's the
right. So I've always assumed some things about MMOs, and I'm finding that my definition is frequently being challenged. Right. People come up with new things all the time, little aspects of things that now have a whole new subgenre or maybe a new genre. Right. But I think, can we agree maybe that an MMO is a persistent online world? So whether I log in or log out, it's still there.
Right.
Is that fair?
I would agree with that, yes.
Okay. Lots of players, and I'm talking about more than 10, like lots of players. A few hundred at least.
We would have to say in the thousands.
Okay.
At a minimum, right?
So does New World qualify with its 2,000 people a server kind of a thing? fair enough. Okay, so
yeah,
okay,
it's on the
many
smaller
hundreds.
side of MMOs, I would say, but it qualifies.
Okay, all right. And then activities that are there that allow folks to group up or perhaps solo, right? But it's really really tending toward the grouping kind of a thing. People playing the game together. That probably has to be anything. What else would you think? Is there any other aspects?
No, I mean, I guess then it just becomes: are you an MMO or are you an MMORPG?
Yes,
whereas
RPG.
MMORPG is a type of MMO. So if we're just focusing on MMOs, then it's any of the flavors are open out there to be considered.
I love paying attention to that RPG element is good, right? RPG, that means anything Dungeons and Dragons and all of the games that have spawned following that, kind of paradigm of gaming, right? In the many years since. So I'm not going to define what an RPG is. I think we should all know by now. Role-playing game, in case anybody there is wondering, is new to our channel. So, okay, so maybe if we have that definition in mind, I would expect these websites would have categories, if they're going to be an MMO site, that would award different aspects of MMORPGs, right? Is that a fair assumption, you would say?
Yeah, it would make sense. Like you'd want to be focusing on stuff that has to do with that. Like it wouldn't have to be like I wouldn't expect there to be
a first-person shooter, right? What is the best first-person shooter to me is outside of the scope of what that website is about. I, as an MMO player, am visiting that website because it's about the genre I like. Right. If they do an award on best first-person shooter, okay, they could do that. I mean, there's nothing stopping them. But a question I would ask probably is, does that have value to me as an MMO person who is at that site to learn or to follow up on MMOs? Right. Okay.
Yeah, mobile games, you wouldn't expect to see those, being reviewed on an MMO website.
Yes, absolutely, right. And so that's kind of one of the questions that we have, at least I have bouncing around in my mind as I was looking at these lists, right? So we'll start, and we're going to go very briefly through this. I don't really want to dig into this too deeply, but MMORPG.com, for instance, did two lists. One was the staff picks, and one was the Player's Choice Awards, which were they put 18 different ones in front of you, and it's the ones that the players happen to vote on the most.
Yeah.
Assuming you know enough, even as a player, of all of those 18 things to meaningfully be able to vote. Or else then it's just a popularity contest, picking whichever one you happen to recognize in the list, right? If you're a one like me, right? So they did two of those different lists, and interesting, it's kind of like their scope was a lot broader than I would expect it to have been, right? We saw things like the best battle royale.
Yeah.
Right. Fortnite won on the staff picks, Apex Legends, the Player's Choice. So, okay. There were some of these are pretty good. Best mobile MMO. I wasn't aware that was a thing.
But I didn't either.
But there it is, right? Best ARPG. And this is one that's worth pointing out for later in these lists, right? They picked Lost Ark in both, right? Lost an ARPG. Maybe that's a subgenre of MMORPG.
That's an action RPG. Isn't that like what Assassin's Creed is? Doesn't that fall into that? Like,
people will argue with us no matter what we say. So
that's a valid point. Yeah.
Right. The way that we classify these things, but it seems to me that their scope was much bigger. Right. Best mobile MMO, best indie MMO. Okay, fair enough. But the fact that they're talking about the best battle royale, the best survival MMO, Valheim. A survival game, if they had said that, sure, but an MMORPG, I don't see. Yes, you can play it with your friends, but I don't see Valheim as a massively multiplayer online game. No. You know what
exactly.
I'm saying? So,
like you can have like a handful of people on the same server playing that, but definitely not like thousands for sure.
Yeah.
I do want to say one thing here. It is possible for a game to fall into multiple categories. Kind of like music. You can have a song that hits the pop charts, but also hits the country charts, or hits the soul charts. So it is possible for things to fall into multiple categories within reason.
Okay, I'm seeing a bit of a Venn diagram show up.
Yeah, exactly.
The circles
there is
overlapping
some
circles.
overlap of certain things. Like if you wanted to judge a role-playing best role-playing game, like SWTOR could be in there, but it could also be in there for best MMO, theoretically. I mean, not that
Sure.
that would ever happen now, but you know,
Right.
but it could have been in there at some point. It could have fallen into both of those categories. So,
Okay.
you know, I'm not
like
arguing that you know, Lost Ark isn't an action game, and it's not a role-playing game. So therefore, does it fall into action RPG? I don't know. I've never played it, so I couldn't tell you. Right. But you know, so it is possible for things to be both an MMO and possibly be seen as something else.
Sure. And I really actually like that. Right. It helps me not to think quite so siloed and categorically. Right. There is some blending in some gray area between them. Overlap, absolutely. And that's okay. So thank you for that, because I think that's a very valuable point worth having in this discussion for sure. Yeah. Right. The only one I think I want to point out, at least as far as MMORPG.com, is their most anticipated award, Winter Riot's Runeterra, right? But Ashes of Creation was the runner-up. For the most anticipated, which, okay, fair enough, right? Okay, let's go on to MMOgames.com. This one is actually, out of all of the lists, it was probably the most focused and the one I like the most as far as their categories. Because to me, the categories pertain to massively multiplayer online role-playing games. Right.
It also was the most limited list of awards that was given out, I think. They only gave out like 6, right? Or 5?
Yeah, 5. Like 5 of them, yeah, absolutely. Right. So, okay, so let's. I mentioned that we would bring up where Ashes of Creation and Pantheon Rise of the Fallen fall in this list, right? So, the best development studio they handed to Intrepid. In fact, even mentioned like we're giving this to them, and their game isn't even out yet, right? But we love the way that they are reaching out to people, the way that they're a transparent studio, that they're doing the development kind of with everybody watching. We love that, right? So that was what brought that to the forefront there. And then rolled the drum for the best upcoming indie MMORPG.
Right. Yeah, Pantheon won that.
Pantheon won that, right? And you did a brief on that.
I did. Yep.
Yes. There should be a link above our heads somewhere.
But again, like, what's the criteria here? Like, who decides that it's the best upcoming or most anticipated or whatever it was that they won? How do you what are you comparing?
What are your criteria, and what makes one list? What makes one method of determining more legitimate than any other method? Right.
Right. I love Pantheon, but if we're going to empirically compare this to something else, what's the criteria you used?
Yeah.
Like, did you do a poll? What were the results of the poll? Who were they compared against?
Did you exactly?
That would be nice to know.
If you had only 3 on there, right? Because your team nominated 3 of them, and then you let the players pick among those 3. What happens if the player base at large actually preferred a 4th candidate more than all of those 3? But because you limited that list, well, you know, so that actually illegitimates the whole thing. Right. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of my question there. So,
yeah. And that's true for all this stuff. Like, what was the methodology used?
Right.
It's kind of like political polls. What questions were asked, and how were they asked, and who were they asked of?
Right. Nobody asked me. Nobody ever asked me. I don't know what's going on.
Well, that's because we put out cringe content and nobody cares.
Right. Nobody wants to ask us.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is very wise, by the way.
Probably, yeah. Right. But yeah, I mean, I think those are legitimate questions. It's like, how do you arrive at this as your answer, right? Like, you've got to limit the list down from everything to 1. However you get there, that's what you've got to do, right? I can see maybe the staff playing a role in limiting it down. I see a lot of wisdom allowing the community to vote, because I think that's more democratic and more fair than your team of 5 people picking whichever game you happen to like the most among the 5 of you. I don't think there's as much legitimacy in that. But the problem with turning it over to the community at large is when you put 8 different options out there, the person that's going to vote in the poll, there's 2 things that happen. Number 1, I go to vote in the poll, and I don't know 7 of these, but one of them I recognize. Ooh, that's the one I know. Check. I voted for that one. Right. My vote shouldn't count then. I don't know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm saying? And it's only people like our friend Kid Lee, right, Mr. Mox? Kid Lee, there's his, yeah?
There he is. All right.
We're going to link him as well. He's one of our buddies. Yeah. In fact, when we launched our New World experiment, he was one of our content creators in his community. that joined us, right? So Kid Lee is a streamer who covers games and plays pretty much everything. There's not many games I think that he doesn't play.
Yep.
He's got the breadth of knowledge.
He's a variety streamer.
Absolutely, and a variety player, right? And he would have the breadth of knowledge to, I think, vote meaningfully in a poll like that. Whereas guys like me, I shouldn't be, voting because I would only vote for the one thing I happen to recognize. And another thing that may happen is that if my game turns out to be on the list of nominees for Game of the Year or for the most anticipated whatever, you better believe I'm going to my Discord community and I'm saying to them, hey guys, it's on the list, go vote. So really, it's a matter of whose community managed to mobilize the best, get on there and vote, right? In which case, it's not really the most anticipated, it's whose community got out the votes the best. And it's more reflective of who can community organize the best, right?
Right. And speaking of Kid Lee, I reached out to him ahead of us recording this because he is between him, JT, and our friend Elise. Those are the three people that I know have their finger on the pulse of upcoming games. Like they watch the development of games. They you ask Kid Lee when's this coming out? It's oh, that's coming out next June, and he's super knowledgeable.
He's got a whole schedule of what comes out when, what he's anticipating more than others, which ones of those he will play.
Yeah,
he's got a timeline figured out as to what he's going to play when, based on launch dates. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah.
So I reached out to him. I asked him. I said, "I'm curious of your thoughts on awards for games in development." Okay, was the question I asked him. And he said, it seems silly to me to give awards to something that is not done. The only category that would be acceptable would be most anticipated.
Okay, yeah.
And I said to him, even then, you could just call it best marketing. And he said, I feel like we need a different word or something. What Ashes and Pantheon are doing is not traditional marketing. Here's a weekly update, more like the best pre-launch community support. Was his idea for a category. Yeah. So that was I reached out to him last week when we started talking about doing this episode in earnest. Yeah. Most anticipated, best upcoming, things like that. Again, I think we need more information and some transparency there.
Interestingly enough, Lost Ark wins for MMOgames.com. Lost Ark won Best New MMORPG.
Right. But how many new MMORPGs came out this year? Or last year?
I mean, that's a legitimate question too, right? I don't know, maybe...
If there was two, launched. It's not hard to pick the best one, probably.
Yeah, out of those.
If there was 6, it would be different.
Yeah. I mean, okay, and that's one of my questions in this is, if you're going to have the best new MMORPG and you're picking one off 2... and number one, let's define the word new, right? Are we talking about in the last 5 years? Right. Are we talking about in the last 3 years? Or is it just over the course of 2022? Because how many years do MMOs go live? You may only have one option to pick. The only one that went live this year, it's the best new one. It happens to also be the worst new one. No matter what, you've provided zero value to the community picking that. You know what I'm saying? Right. So... Best new expansion, WoW Dragonflight, MMO fans, they liked EVE Online's community, so that was, I think, a decent list, right?
Yeah, but again, they were very focused in their awards, so I feel like it lends some weight, some gravitas to their list versus, let's say, Massively OP's list, which takes up a whole page on Google Docs.
Yes. So the Disparate Worlds award for best MMO games end of year awards goes to MMO games because the two of us decided it was the case.
That's right.
Which legitimates everyone else's votes.
It's just as valid as any of their other awards.
Right.
So
they're award winning now. They can tell the world.
Your brass pile of poop award will be forthcoming.
The Disparate Worlds awards. Can you imagine? Right. Massively OP is a site that you and I are very familiar with. We've worked with some of their content creators in SWOTOR. Ironically, the biggest MMO disappointment for the year turned out to be...
I fully support this decision.
SWOTOR, the Star Wars The Old Republic, Legacy of the Sith, which actually kind of makes me sad. I laugh at it, but it
does.
It's my heritage,
agree. But when you release an expansion and it's less than 3 hours of content...
Yeah. That's not an expansion, and the community knows it, You did not, fool any of us. That's
Right.
just an update that you named an expansion.
Yeah.
It's deflating. We all know it. Quit trying to hype. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So it didn't work. Like selling it for something it wasn't didn't work. And the biggest MMO disappointment, I think that wins, right?
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, the story of the year turned out to be crypto in MMOs. I know that's been a discussion. It's one I'm glad that we haven't gotten into very much.
Yeah.
But I know it's a stupid idea, using crypto in MMOs. Like, please, let's just keep this simple,
Right. Keep crypto out of it. Keep NFTs out of it. Let's just keep it real.
But they did some more interesting categories, and some of them I like the best MMO housing. Those are things we care about. Right? Like, who has the best housing system in MMOs to date, right?
Who's got the best character creator? Who's got the...
totally.
Those are things I can get behind, and those are things that you can...
They offer me value, right? Yeah, as a player, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, like the best new MMO class they had is the Guild Wars 2 Mechanist, happened to be on the list. That's pretty cool. That offers some value, right? Because I can go learn some things about that class, and now know some, maybe if I approach it in a different MMO, or if they start to talk about a different class, I have a point of reference to compare it to that I did not before, because these awards sent me in the right direction, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
MMOs.com had some other good ones, Content Creator of the Year award. But they also included, esports. Again... Yeah. Does that have a place in the MMO world? And I think not.
Most MMOs don't, right? And MMOs.com was very much a games awards, right? When you're talking about the game of the year being Elden Ring, which is not an MMO, right? This is not, immediately, right? But that's the thing. But apparently they're like God of War Ragnarok a lot.
Yeah.
Best score, best performance, right? I don't know what that necessarily means. I guess it's voice acting. Or maybe
I would imagine
mocap, you know what I'm saying? Whatever, the creation kind of thing. Best narrative,
and while I'm panning them, they also did include the Best Innovation and Accessibility award, which
that's
again,
cool.
for those people that need that accessibility, that's important, and I think it's good to know what games excel in that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think they deserve to be awarded for going the extra mile. It's one of the things I've enjoyed seeing as aspects of Overwatch 2. For Overwatch and Overwatch 2 really had things for color blindness, right? You can change the color schemes of things to be able to show up. Thank you for doing that. Those are, when you do that in your games, it helps those, everybody to be able to play and enjoy. So very cool.
So that's the overview of kind of the awards that we saw come out at the end of November into December. But I guess the big question is, what's the purpose of all that? Is it offering us value of any sort, or is it just a list to be like, there's a list?
And I think that's what they do, right? Like, a lot of these sites go, hey, it's the end of the year. We should do something for the end of the year. And I know you and I, Mox, have asked the question even of ourselves, right? Hey, what should be our end of the year thing? Should it be a year in review? Should we do that? And I know some other content creators in our communities have done that, right? Like I've seen things from Narc, from Basgrim, etc., that have also done, hey, what happened this year? What, is this driving toward the end that we want it to, right? So I think there's some legitimacy in saying, okay, and if you do awards, if you're covering multiple different things, I can see a point to this. But the question is, who is your audience? I think that needs to be taken into account. And does your list offer that audience value, right? What are they there to learn and to chase down? And is it meaningful content to them? If not, it's just content for the sake of content, and there's no value for anyone.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
I think having your list of categories matters for one, right?
Right. Absolutely. So, and then it comes down to, how do you come about the list? Like, where do your nominations come from? Do they come from internally or externally?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then how do you come to the final decision? Like, what's the whenever I see a list of the top X of anything, I like to see what their thought process is, how are they comparing it, what's the methodology I didn't see that in any of these, with the exception of the MMOs.com, which told us why they chose Intrepid. Why was that the top studio? Like, they gave us an insight.
Justify it, right? Even if it's a staff pick, you've at least got an argument and some kind of an explanation of the methodology used to get to that answer.
Right. So I think that's important.
An approach I think I like is and it's admittedly probably the most work, but it's to do a tournament style thing, right? Category of the game of the year, right? List all the games and just pair them off against each other, and then out of these two, this one's the one. It's like I said, it's a lot of work, right? But you do it in rounds.
That is a lot of work, and I've seen that done on Twitter and on websites and such.
And it takes a long time, right?
It does.
But to me, that the result of that would be the one I would trust the most. Then the staff narrowed it down to 10. Oh well, the game I liked, it didn't make the list because y'all don't care about it. You know what I'm saying?
Doesn't that method also rely on how the brackets are laid out? Because if you got two popular games in the bracket 1,
well, okay, the more popular one would win out
in the end when they should potentially.
Yeah. So you may end up with a highly popular game being taken out very early in the list. You wouldn't know which is the second, the third, the fourth. It's less reliable there, but the winner would be the winner, I would say, if you're kind of trying to narrow it down to one.
You're probably right. The winner probably would be the winner, but I think it's less reliable in getting you, say, your top 5.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, that's there's pros and cons to every methodology you would use trying to narrow down that list,
right? So
that the end result is actually meaningful, right? I don't know.
The issue we have, and I think this came up in our pre-talk discussion, hasn't come up yet, but if we're talking specifically about MMOs, how many new MMOs are out there every year?
Yeah, and the most anticipated MMO means, I mean, if there's only one anticipated MMO in development
on the horizon,
or 3 of them, right? That anybody's paying attention to. Right, and you can, and that's one of the things that both of our studios are doing, right? Visionary Realms and Intrepid have both been hyping their games, getting them out there, sharing the development. Well, that's going to create a little bit more anticipation, and maybe they should win the award then because they're actually winning the most anticipated fight. You know what I'm saying? They're doing a good job doing that, building it anticipation. Maybe it's actually legitimate if one of these 2 wins.
Right.
I don't know.
I almost think that the best way to find out what the most anticipated game would be to go out onto Twitch and YouTube and find out how many videos were made on each new upcoming one, and see who had the most that. Then therefore that's the most anticipated because people are most interested in creating and viewing that content.
Or you have a very complex metric that's one of the factors in it, right? Like a huge equation. That's one of the variables. Another variable is Google searches. Right, I'm sure you can get that on trends or whatever, right? You can find out who's been Googling what. Okay, well, there you go. I don't know how many I think content creation is whatever. Go onto the Reddits and find what's the hype,
many posts.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I think you could do to probably mature that, but there's much more work, I think, than maybe this kind of effort is worth. Maybe they're just like, dude, we're just trying to get something on our website for the end of the year. Would you go away?
Right.
Which is probably really what's going on here. We should really shut up. I don't know.
Well, that's always true.
Right.
All right. So, let's see. What else do we want to talk about here? How did Pantheon become the most anticipated MMO with such a niche community that everybody talks about? I
worded that so much more meanly than you did. So just to allow people to peek behind the curtains, I put that question in there, right, in our notes. It's one of the things I'm struggling with in this conversation, right? Is I think it is no brainer that it is a niche community. It is a lot of EverQuest diehards, right? And Brad McQuaid fans or whatever. It's a niche community, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that, right?
Right.
But it's distinctively smaller than the kind of a community that would anticipate
Ashes
of Creation, right? Or Guild Wars. If you're taking expansions, like launches of content, If that's how you define things, right? You've got the Dragonflight, right, for WoW, and you've got, the End of Dragons or whatever they call it for Guild Wars 2. All of that kind of in the running, right? What makes, Pantheon the winner in that kind of a thing? I think it's community organization.
It's a vocal minority.
A vocal minority, right? Word gets out, hey, we're nominated. Let's go vote for our game, and you do, and so they win. And is there value in that? Is it the most anticipated MMO? Well, a factor in that question is your community enthusiastic? Definitely yes, in that sense. Right. So maybe it is a legitimate finding. You know what I'm saying? The fact that that was the award, yes, it's deserved. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't know.
Again, it comes down to that. Let's have some transparency. Find out how you came about this.
Right. Yeah. Or are we overthinking this and we should just, like I said, go home? Who knows? Right. Yeah.
So we've panned a lot on these websites that are putting these awards out there. What do you think are good categories to give awards on in the MMO genre? So like specific to MMOs.
I definitely found some of these categories that I really liked, right? Things that they were offering awards to that I had never thought of before that really I think should be awarded.
Okay.
Right? Some of these were really cool. Like, what was the one that we saw here? Oh, one of these was, and I put this on, we made a little list of some things here just so we could offer some ideas, right? But the best game engine, that's cool, right? Okay, because I think all of these things run on something really underneath whatever that just kind of deserves some recognition, right? Like if Unreal 5 is doing a really good job, why not give Unreal 5 or Unity or whatever engine we're talking about the nod, right?
Right.
But there's more, right? Obvious ones like Game of the Year, most anticipated, that I think we can probably understand.
Right.
I think there's some value in those categories. But I think there are aspects of studios, the MMO life cycle, running an MMO that deserved a nod that typically don't get the nod. You know what I'm saying? They touched on it a little bit with which is the best studio. One of these did, right? Which is the best studio. But I think you could break that down into something more granular, right? Who has the best live operations, right? Who has the best customer service, maybe?
Right.
By the way, you can also do best and worst, right? So I think it's equally meaningful to say who has the worst customer service. That deserves to be an award too. Because maybe that kick in the pants is something that X studio deserves, so that they know that their customer service is by and large hated by the community. They should do something about it. You know what I'm saying? I think it's worth having some of these negatives in here as well, right? Whoever's published the best expansion recently over the year, right? Or whoever has the best vision, maybe. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, best story. Like, that's definitely out there. And then we saw one of them was giving an award for the best content creator. You also mentioned like the side of the studio that interacts with those content creators, who does the best job of kind of interacting with them and promoting them and thus promoting their own content.
Right, because I know, like for instance, Intrepid has got an example of this where they've had people applying for a long time. So they've got these applications coming in, but there's nothing going on in the studio to be able to ingest those applications, to look through them, to determine which of those content creators they've decided they want to have a relationship with, and then managing that relationship where you give previews, where you allow them to take footage of stuff, and you work with them to do releases, or you set up interviews with the creative leads or whatever, right? And
also set standards for, we want creators who put out X number of contents per month and have this size of an audience and things of that nature. We found in our interactions with our studios that Intrepid has a much tighter rein on who they're willing to work with, as opposed to Visionary Realms. Visionary Realms was willing to work with us when we only had like 6 episodes out. But Intrepid,
for which we are eternally thankful, right? Because that warmed us to. Interestingly enough, I would, as much of a powerhouse, so to speak, as Intrepid is in so many ways, if there was a Disparate Worlds award for the content creator relations, I would give it to Visionary Realms hands down, because they are willing to meet with us. They actually want to acknowledge we exist, and
they're willing to.
We love you.
And it's just a smaller content creators, not just us. It's other content creators that aren't huge.
Yeah.
So. The awards thing is a complex, obviously, thing, and I think a lot of it is like editors sitting around having a conversation over a cup of coffee or a beer and being like, all right.
And there's nothing wrong with it. There really isn't anything wrong with them publishing what they want to.
We're panning it, and we're saying that there's issues with it, but they're putting content out and they're advertising games, so that's not a bad thing.
And hey, we managed to juice an episode for our show out of looking at their content, so I think
we did.
Nothing wrong with that, right? So, but I mean, like, I think it's. Kind of summing everything up, it's worth a think, right? It's worth putting your mind to what are we trying to accomplish here? Are we accomplishing it, right? Who is our audience? Are we offering that audience any kind of value? Those kinds of questions, I think, deserve a place at the table in this greater discussion. Let
us know in your thoughts. And you know what? Just as a side, tell us what you thought that your game of 2022 was. Like, what game did you play the most or enjoy the most? Sure. Whether it be new or old, let us know what you're playing.
And it doesn't have to be an MMORPG. We're going to distinctively break that mold here, and it can be anything you care about.
Absolutely. All right, well, I think that's going to wrap us up. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook at facebook.com/DisparateWorlds, on Twitter at Disparate Worlds, our website, disparateworlds.org, and our Patreon, patreon.com/DisparateWorlds. In addition, on our website and in the description below is a link to our Discord. Please join us there for discussions of this and other sundry topics.
Indeed. Mox, you're so good at doing that, sir. I stumble through my lines every time, and you just nail them. It's just great. I'll give you some kudos for a change, as opposed to
thank you.
Telling you how much you suck, which I'll reserve for next episode. Okay.
All right, good.
Right. That will be it for us this episode, friends. Thank you very much for watching. As always, we are eternally thankful to you. Do the engagement thing. Like, we would love to hear from you. It's really, we joke every week about, hey, it helps us with the YouTube algorithm. Actually, it does. I mean, every comment, every like we get, every subscribe, helps us drive the channel, reach one or two more people that can join us in our community, and we can have more voices. And I think building the community is half the fun here, right? We love you guys. We want this to be a thriving community, so that helps us out. But it's secondary, right, to what we're trying to achieve, and that's having this community, and we appreciate your engagement, right? That's what we care about. So do those things. Notification bell, that way you won't miss anything that is new. We are publishing much more stuff than we used to, and so things are coming along. I think that's it for us, right, Mox? Are we done?
That's it for me.
We are done.
I'm looking forward to this year.
Indeed. A lot's coming, so stay tuned. Take care of yourselves, and remember always to be immovable in your principles and irresistible in your passion.